All right, this is my audience.
Hi.
All right, we'll go ahead and get started here. According to Fantasy Football, there's an article by Michael Wenrich. Nearly 60 million people participated in fantasy football during the 2017-2018 NFL season. I've been playing fantasy football since I was 10 years old. I feel like I've developed a winning strategy in this game, one that can help my audience and others win their leagues and season-long leagues. Fantasy football is a game that involves a blend of quarterbacks, wide receivers, running backs, kickers, tight ends, and defenses. And the goal of the game is to have the highest weekly point total based on their performances. Drafting a running back within the first 2 rounds of a fantasy football draft is the correct move because the running back position is scarce, other positions in the game are deep, and has winning statistics and performances. Let's begin with the scarcity at the running back position. Running back position has a lack of depth, as shown according to CBS Sports in 2017. The highest scoring running back in fantasy football was Todd Gurley at 303 fantasy points per game, or 303 fantasy points during the season. The 10th highest scoring running back was Ezekiel Elliott at 159 points during the season. This shows that the 10th best running back scored nearly 2 times less points than Todd Gurley, who was the highest scoring running back. It's also becoming increasingly hard to draft running back during the mid-rounds, as their average draft position is rising. According to Fantasy Football Calculator, on average, 8 of the first 10 picks in 2018 NFL fantasy football drafts are running backs. This includes 13 of the first 20. This shows that it's becoming increasingly hard to get a good running back within the mid-rounds of NFL fantasy football drafts. So we've talked about the scarcity at the running back position. Now let's talk about depth at other positions, and we'll start off with the quarterback position. According to ESPN senior writer Matthew Berry, last season quarterbacks who went undrafted in 50% of leagues finished as top 10 weekly performers 89 times. Along with that, last season quarterbacks who were drafted in 50% of leagues finished as top 10 weekly performers 81 times at the position. This shows that quarterbacks who were undrafted performed as top 10 weekly performers more than quarterbacks who were drafted in more than 50% of leagues, which shows how deep the quarterback position is and how undrafted players can make a huge impact on your league. It also shows that it might be smart to wait on them because you could strike gold later in the draft. Also, according to CBS in 2017, the difference between the second highest scoring quarterback and the 10th highest scoring quarterback was 102 fantasy points. And the difference between the 10th best and 20th best quarterback in 2017 was 73. As we saw with the running back position, that is not a huge difference. And since quarterback is the highest scoring position in the game, it indicates that it's not as important to draft one early in the draft because you could strike gold later in the draft. Then we'll also talk about the depth of wide receiver. According to CBS, the difference between the first and the 10th highest scoring wide receiver was 61 fantasy points. The difference between the 10th and the 20th was 21 fantasy points. This is an extremely alarming stat, as only a 61 point difference is just not the same as the running back position, as they nearly doubled each other from 1st to 10th. And the 10th to 20th was 21, which also shows how deep the position is. There's not much variety in performance. So now we've talked about the depth of other positions, quarterback and receiver. We're going to talk about how a running back can turn a team's fantasy season around and its winning statistics. According to NFL.com, an article by Mike Franciscovich, the highest owned player on a fantasy football championship team in 2017 was Todd Gurley. He appeared on 48% of championship teams. And his average draft position was the second round, which shows that it's smart to draft a running back within the first 2 rounds, of course. Also in the same article, 6 of 10 of the highest found performers on championship teams were running backs. Again, showing that it's increasingly important to have good running backs on your team, and they most likely will turn into good fantasy seasons. I also have personal experience in this, as I have drafted running backs with the first 3 picks in both my last 2 seasons and have won both times, showing that having good running backs, 1 or 2, can turn out to help your fantasy team in a huge way. So now that we have talked about the winning statistics of running backs, we're going to talk about what we just went over and how that strategy could win you your season. Drafting a running back within the first 2 rounds of your fantasy football drafts is the correct move because, of course, the position is scarce. As we saw, there aren't very many high-performing running backs, and having a good one can nearly double their performance over a mediocre one or their 10th best one. The depth of other positions are staggering. wide receiver difference between 10th and 20th is not that big of a deal, as I share with my statistics. So it's becoming less important to have a great wide receiver because the difference between them and the 20th best even is not that great. In the winning statistics, as we saw, 6 of the 10 highest rated players found championship teams were running backs. So it's increasingly important to have a good running back in your team, and it shows with championship wins. So I hope you guys have learned about this strategy, and I hope you guys implement it in your drafts. And if you do, I guarantee a good fantasy season, especially if you have 2 or just even 1 great running back. Thank you for listening. Hope you learned something about fantasy football.